If you go to any neighborhood or community in southeast Fairfax County, Mount Vernon, the Route 1 corridor, there will be history behind that community. We call it Richmond Highway now, but it was really the center of development in southeast Fairfax County. It's where they built the churches that they went to. All the denominations sort of clustered around this pathway, this corridor. And in the turn of the 20th century, they started building schools along this pathway. Well, a major milestone during the 1930s was the opening of the Mount Vernon Parkway, which was 1932. And the parkway brought a great deal more visitors to Mount Vernon. When the trolley was running from the 1890s on, the trolleys would come up the tracks onto what is now the turnaround in front of Mount Vernon entrance. So the concrete in 1932 replaced the trolley tracks. Well, a lot of the visitors that come to see Mount Vernon also stop at Woodlawn Plantation, which is just less than a mile away on Route 1. And it was built by George's step-granddaughter, Nellie, who married George's nephew. And it stayed in the Lewis family for years until it was bought by a group of Quakers that came down from New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And those Quakers just revolutionized southeast Fairfax County, revitalized the agrarian economy, and their influence is felt till today. Woodlawn Plantation stayed in private hands up until the late 1940s. Now it's owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Farther south on Route 1 from Woodlawn is Mason Neck, and it was the site of George Mason's home, and his seat was Gunston Hall. Lewis Hurtle was the last private owner. He kept it until the 1930s when he died. His heirs sold it to the Commonwealth of Virginia. If you've finished visiting Gunston Hall, you want to get back on Richmond Highway, head north. And of course, you'll pass through Fort Belvoir, which used to be Camp Humphreys. And it has an interesting history, and it's been around since before World War I, when it was Camp Humphreys. And there was a spurt of building. In fact, that caused the paving of Richmond Highway so that Army could bring more material and supplies down to Camp Humphreys. But in the interwar years, it slowed down a little bit, and then World War II broke out, and Fort Belvoir suddenly got bigger and bigger. It sort of subsumed a lot of private farmland. In fact, there's a cemetery still left over there from a church that was forced to move from Fort Belvoir to Gum Springs, and the Army takes care of the cemetery and allows the church members to come over and visit the graves. And today it's just a bustling activity down there with a brand new hospital and a number of Army commands that moved down during the base relocation period. Gum Springs is a community on Richmond Highway that's been there for a long, long time. It gained its name from a water spring in the midst of a grove of gum trees. By the time of desegregation in the late 50s and 60s, Gum Springs, parts of it had fallen into a pretty sad state. The Gum Springs residents got together and started to pool their resources and build new houses. And there are several areas in Gum Springs where they did that, and one of them is along Fordson Road. And that led to the general revitalization of the Gum Springs community. And if you were to go over there today, you might not realize that it was a historic African-American community. Well, the golden age of the automobile travel in the 1950s and 60s was enabled, at least locally, by Route 1, Richmond Highway. And it was part of the grand U.S. Route 1 that ran from Maine to Florida, and people were going north and south on it. This is way before the interstate system. There were so many motels along Route 1, and one of the most popular was the Mount B. The rooms were in little cabins that were scattered about, and you could pull your car right up to the cabin. And that was a formula that started way years before that, in the 1920s, with the Pendaw Motel, right at the corner of Kings Highway and Richmond Highway. And it was named for two men. Cooper Dawson was the Daw, and I forget who the Penn was. But it was the first motor court in the eastern United States. On the north end of the highway, up just south of Old Town Alexandria, is a motel that's continued to flourish, the Travelers Inn. And it was one of those closest to the district, and it got a lot of business from people driving north on the Richmond Highway. It was just a vibrant time for the area. In the course of perhaps 10 to 15 years, went from a farming area to a suburban bedroom community. And Mount Vernon, the Richmond Highway was right in the middle of that. New residents coming in, the federal workers that wanted a place to live. And people would never know that there were cattle that grazed in that area because the Route 1 corridor was home to many dairy farmers. And the last one hung around until about 1960. Thompson Dairy, and the old Thompson Dairy barn as part of the church on Sherwood Hall Lane, the Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church. One of the things I enjoy talking about is what's underneath that concrete or behind that shopping center or what used to be there. And we can all be proud of the heritage of the area. And it all started with the Potomac Path, which became Richmond Highway.